That horrible winter had passed, but by spring the 1900 Scots found themselves stuck on the Isles. The Norse force of nearly 4,000 strong was blocking their path to Moray. Meanwhile, the Scots themselves were scattered. The 149 Highlanders from Ross were with the main force on the Isles, but an army of 5 were cut off and as far south as Lothian. There was another force too, an Irish one, commanded by a drunken zealot count, who alone led the Irish resistance against the Norse. All these armies combined could not hope to match the numbers of the Norse, and they were separated. Though they were too few to fight the invaders head-on, they were too many to lay down their arms and continued resisting. Whenever Ivar's army approached, the Scots evaded them, melting down into the highlands and fog of nearby lochs, before appearing again in another place in force. There is that king of Scots, not of the land, but of the people. Up in the highlands though, the clans are unruly, they only hold allegiance to their own. They disregard the king. They taunt the Vikings, they do as they please. And the worst of them are the MacMorgan clan. Be very careful there. The natives are dangerous, language incomprehensible, and the weather is awful. MacMorgan clan, the Troublemakers of Scotland. Other conflicts too continued. Tribals of Caithness beat back several invasions of equal number from an island up north, and King Run led another attack against besiegers of his kingdom. When her warband passed through Ross, Dervorgilla did not join them. Though the regency of her husband had ended, she upheld his ruling and stayed in recovery after giving birth to their daughter. Her lack of presence was noted by the king. He took it as another betrayal of the Highlanders. When at council, the chiefess tended to domestic duties. The loss of her bishop's support caused a great deal of worry when she was campaigning on the Isle of Man, and Dervorgilla made every attempt to reconcile with the bishop. She showered him with rewards, but could not sway him ever since their falling out of the Nizam. Her father would grant his old bishop every honor, including that of regent and commander, though a fighting man he was not. He then himself in private would scoff cynically at all the hollow titles he had given. Young Dervorgilla would protest this openly, as was her nature, yet as of late she came to recognize the wisdom in the decision. It made a whole lot more sense to her now, when she was walking in her father's position. Both realms bled a lot in this conflict. 2 of the 3 remaining live sons of King Ivar had been captured on the Isles and remained in Scottish prison, as had his 2 concubines as well. In turn, King Constantine II had his sister captured by the Norse king. The woman has been rescued since, but the king did not trust her again, since she was found to have been taken as the pagan's lover. She was the very same woman that the minority, including Morgan and Dervorgilla, supported in the crown succession, but as she remained in her brother's prison, the support had entirely went over to the king's son. King Run's attack on besiegers at Old Cled had failed. His troops outnumbered the enemy, but the Norse of Isle of Man proved a tough opponent, and King Run a meek commander. With his son and grandson having been captured, it was up to him to fight off the invaders. He smashed in with army after army into the pagan shield wall, seemingly coming back with more men after each battle lost. After one such defeat, the Norse simply left, unable to take another Pyrrhic victory. King Run took a wound in the fighting, and though he has been thoroughly reduced to an infirm man, he kept his crown. His ancient kingdom of Outcled weathered another event in its history. The Scots continued to evade all throughout the land. They took smaller favorable engagements whenever they could, even winning some of the smaller skirmishes. They gradually lost land, however, and King Constantine grew frustrated at his inability to push back against the larger heathen force. When he returned some of the prisoners, they came back injured and maimed, even mutilated. Eventually the army would run out of ground to give though, and in September, an engagement was forced. It would be satisfying to say that the tables turned around again, but as is often the case, the expected outcome occurred. The Scots fought ever more bravely knowing they were outnumbered, but it wasn't enough. Their scent eventually broke, and the battle was lost. Though casualties were high on both sides, the Scots had lost all third of a battle, especially in the north, and Scotland was spent. It was in these times of desolation and want, the neighbouring province of Moray was especially devastated, that Malcolm MacMorgan grew up. He was further encouraged by his parents to persevere. Though the Highlanders fought all throughout the war, the Vorgila did not, a fact that became very apparent when the army marched to Ross upon retreat. King Constantine II saw the Vorgila in plain good health inside the safety of a settlement, and the two initially fought. Though the king had always been vindictive when it came to distributing justice to his subjects, he might have forgiven her absence, but when the countryside became unruly, the Vorgila bid her 70 men to stay. This slight, and the fact that the war against a heathen army turned the pious king cruel as well, made King Constantine resent chiefess the Vorgila. The two turned enemies, inciting cinders in the MacMorgan-MacAlpin feud. Commander Stephen was one of the men who did not count among the 70 who had returned. Initially he was thought to be lagging behind, but by mid-January news had spread of his capture. Stephen was being held in Dublin, with Dublin's Norse chieftain away serving with his king. Dublin itself was under certain duress as well, with an army of Irish, led by an up-jumped peasant chief raiding its countryside. This made reaching out slow, and when they did, the Dublin chief refused to accept ransom. Stephen has been severely injured and lost a leg in the fighting, thus he has been caught and taken prisoner since. The Vorgila sent her Chancellor Nizam to convince the Norseling chief to take the gold. Stephen's captor was reluctant, and Stephen had taken too many wounds to endure the weight. He died in dungeons of Forstein of Dublin, 13 days after Nizam has arrived. He left his son, Conan, an orphan, and his mother a widow. The Vorgila would later take the child into her household as a ward, to raise along with her son out of respect for his father. When next the Norse clashed with the king's troops, the Highlanders infamously didn't join them. "He hates me because I didn't die for him. Well, I've spilled enough blood of my men, and good men they were. They won't return to us. Let him bleed his. It won't change the outcome." 2 more battles took place in March and June that year, both ending in Scottish losses. The Vorgila gained some valuable practical experience, having dealt with the ruffians, and continued to pursue her martial education. And though improvement was slow, she found she could draw on her oratory ability to boost martial prowess instead. Her charisma was of particular use when leading men, and on the battlefield she made an inspiring presence. Her twin sisters took on education of their own. Though raised by their mother, it was their chiefess sister who had charted their development early on. Marfrock was more playful and driven than timid and indolent Kentigernna, but both were kind, affectionate ladies of the court. The Vorgila saw a lot of herself in the twins, and judged that courtly education would serve them well. Among the numerous deaths of 881 was King Run. It seems he spent his last breath defending his kingdom, and old Clut passed away to his son Ossid. Many conflicts were petering out in Scotland. but a revolt raged in England, where in order to please the local Saxons, Jorvik's new lords set themselves in a collision course against the heathen army of the Norse. The early onset of peace and the quelling of malcontents tired of war made Ross a safe haven of sorts. In that short time, the Vorgila renewed alliances and spent time reading old military texts, a more cerebral bent in contrast to the practical approach of her father. The war and death that surrounded her took a toll on the chiefess. Loath to express her pain, she made snide remarks at her courtiers instead, most of which were left unwarranted. In one such instance, where she made a particularly well-meaning woman cry, she caught herself in pain and wrath, which reminded her of her father's wrath over sick Marthok, or the late cynicity of her mother. She had that seed in herself from them, she knew, but she swore to kindness. The studies paid off, and though far from a tactical master, the Vorgila became a proficient organizer of troops. She made a proficient if not good commander, so long as she focused on it. Men couldn't fight without supplies, as campaign on Isle of Man has shown, however well organized. She needed gold, and to gain gold, she needed the support of her bishop. Soft power only gained so much favor with court chaplain Brian, the bishop of Rosemarkie. Privileges needed to be handed out. Thus, Bishop Brian was declared commander not on merit, but due to status, a move that was criticized. Chiefess, I'll remind you, the peril you were in when no capable commander was present in battle. I will always remember the way you looked when I found you. For my fear of your safety, please do not surround yourself with inadequate leadership. Marshal Fingal was thanked for his counsel. Yet this was just short of assuring Rosemarkie's support. In light of this, Crinan suggested that their son should be given to school with the clergy. Bishop Brian may have been a stranger to the Vorgila, but he and Crinan knew each other well, having been allies on many a matter on the council. From his point of view, he would be giving his son to a trusted friend. The Vorgila felt uneasy about the proposal. It asked a lot of her. In some ways, her son was still a baby to her, the one that she breastfed herself. But as reports came of Norse in Moray and Athol, she deemed it necessary to get done. The chiefess came to trust Crinan's judgment and took the idea as her own. A much more vigorous resistance was put up than in the case of the commandery, because this time it came from Uriel, who herself was a chiefess and had no scruples about offering opposition. I knew I should have intervened before I saw you humble yourself at the Holy Communion. It is at the wrong hands that you put your faith in. Make no mistake, these are no true men of God. How can you say that, mother? The priests are good men. The clerical education will be good for him, the Vorgila said. He can learn to read and write. He will grow up to be a better man than his grandfather. And he will not be far away from home should he need me. Would that the times were different. A lady of Ross shouldn't have to kowtow to the clergy. Would that your father hadn't died, I could forbid you. Enough. It will be good for a boy to learn of Christ. I am the father, or am I not? Men will do what they want, regardless of reason. That much I've learned. Do what you want with your son, but leave my girls alone. Malmor came under Bishop Brian's care. She would never touch the twin girls, however. Whether it was their agreement or simply fear of their mother is not known. The island conquest of Moray has ended with the summer of 882. Scotland has been cut in half, with lowlands in the south and highlands in the north. In time, this would create a cultural rift between the two regions. Moray was lost to Ivar the Boneless, king of the Isles. Moray has fell just as Argyll once had. those old enough to have feuded with Moray clan, such as Marshal Fingal or Spymaster Kalin, and even Mayor, though no longer steward, rejoiced in this. Crinan soon snapped them out of it, though. My clan was cast out, wife killed and home destroyed. I then left our land, seeking not to reclaim or avenge, but to warn the Scottish clans of the threat they now faced. I had no men to show them, and no gold to offer them. No one would join a mercenary with a just cause but with no company. The clans would bicker among themselves because bickering was easy and fellowship was hard. I went to the south. I should have headed north. I found a place among you clansmen. You gave me a place on your council and the hand of your chiefess. You listened while others promised. I do not seek birthright or vengeance, though I will have my birthright and my vengeance. I seek to throw the heathens back into the sea. The pagans are after us, Moray fields are burning. You all see the smoke, so promise me now. The Danes lulled us with their raids. They established the state as normalcy. It made us complacent. This is no raid, it's an invasion. They now come not only to plunder the churches, but take your land as well. My husband is right, and I will make that promise. There will be no more Danes in Highlands, and no more raids as well. To this the men cheered. To Dervorgila's dismay, her test of resolve would come imminently. Upon King Run's death, his son Ossit ascended to kingship. The ambitious general immediately rallied his troops and struck out against Ivar the Boneless. At council, Dervorgila confided her worries to her husband. "I had hoped we would have time," she said. Her own speech compelled her to action. Ross was the first to pull out of the war, and the only to recover some strength. If any tribe could offer assistance, it would be them. In truth, they needed preparation. What was Ossit thinking? Ivar holds vast territories, and a lot of strength to draw from. You are still small. The truth of it was proven to the Scots when Ivar called on his Dublin's vassals and beat the Scottish king on second try. He might match Ivar now, but soon he'll be outnumbered. The chiefess sent her spymaster to outclut and agonize on what she should do should a call to arms come. Meanwhile, King Constantine took his men to fight off invaders from Orkney. Having brought a force to tilt the scales of the local engagement, he took command in Caithness and won several battles. Ossit struck hard and he struck fast. Ossit's siege has lured out Ivar and forced an engagement. Ossit triumphed in the ensuing fight and took the Norse king prisoner. Dervorgila nearly jumped up when she heard the news. Ivar was released, his sovereign territory ceded, with no involvement from either the Highlanders or the Scots. Ossit's fame grew and the aura of Norse invincibility was broken. During that time, something had happened in the north. Gideon, 12, son of Hugh, High Chief of the Highlands, set his council at Caithness. He decreed that he would rule the Highlands from the tribal settlement there until such time that Moray could be reclaimed. Dervorgila found this out from her sister and her husband as they appeared at Ross Palisade, fleeing the north. "I was right about that devil's spawn," Morag fumed. "He has displaced my husband's rule and deserved his title." Her husband, Donald of Magir clan, was a shy, charitable and kindly man, largely considered dull-witted among his peers. When Ninian arrived, fleeing the Norse at Moray, he was met as High Chief, with all the considerations given to his station. With 2 chiefs at court, there arose visible confusion as to which chief answered to the other. MacGurk sought the loyalty of the clan, but we were subjects of their impoverished liege. With time, and in large part to Chief Donald's leniency, the Nyan's regents established their council as the superior of the 2. The move was largely facilitated by the king during his northern campaign. Believing they were now in danger, Morag snuck herself and her husband out of Caithness and returned to her childhood home, requesting her sister's aid. By the end of 882, Dervorgilla would find herself pressed by her family and facing an external threat all at the same time. MacMorgan clan, the Troublemakers of Scotland. Her twin sisters took on education of their own. Though raised by their mother, it was their chiefess sister who had charted their development early on. Marthok was the more playful